introduction of the staff set by one of my black belts, Jim Wilson, that this is definitely a power set. You notice that the staff is used is very solid, and I purposely, and I gave you one section of the staff where when I went back, I put it in a freeze frame where you can see that the staff was actually bowed, which you'd never be able to see without stop motion. Basically then, the movement throughout this entire set is basically that of a single-headed staff we're using the power. Notice that all we're really doing from here, you start in this position, transgress slightly, we'll take it in a 360-degree rotation. This is called Skylight Staff, and the reason for this is the continuous high movements going up towards the sky and coming back down, hence the name. The set definitely has a lot of power, since it is a rather elementary set. As far as the introduction of power, from here you see a lot of repeated movements. Also, I will take, when we take the spear set, the second spear set, I will show you the adaptation of this particular set. As I teach it in a class formally, I teach it on the same side as we do the staff. When I take it as a spear set though, I will definitely switch it to the right-hand side. So everything's going to be moving in the opposite direction. So that all of you, these movements you see with the strike from here will be done with the spearing movement. Skylight Staff. First movement, I'm going to step in from here and adjust the hand in such a manner that I have the room for maximum power. At this point, I have to show you a relationship between the power striking movement from here for maximum power on the staff and the same cutting movement of a sword. The movement I'm talking about now, the hand adjustment, should be within about 6 inches. This is the standard deviation on a sword. Notice the two-hand movement or one-hand movement with a sword. From here, this is going to be the length that's going to give me the maximum power. You'll notice as you take any of the Chinese and the Japanese weapons, the actual length of the blade, when we're talking about the actual swords, will vary very little, because over years and experience they found out the proper balance, weight, and power comes from the sword of a given length. The same thing now is true when we take the staff set. If I try to strike with the hand all the way back from here, this can only be achieved if I move in a greater distance. Therefore, let me go back to our basic darkroom staff from here. As I come out, the strike and hand movement is made to here. Let me at this point now show you where the left hand is, and let me show you the relationship. Like I pointed out, within 6 inches from here, it's exactly the same distance. So as we're taking our basic sword and staff movements, remember, as you're coming forward, basically what you have the same movement as you're striking forward with a sword. The movements are almost interchangeable. The breakdown of the darkroom staff, 2 fingers are brought up in this particular case. This is a carryover from the tradition. It is used as a spear. The 2 fingers would indicate in this particular case there are 2 edges to the particular blade. Perhaps this is a good time to digress at this particular point from here and talk about the effect of bladed weapons in relation to all the publicity that they're now getting nationwide. The candidate is introduced a bill to eliminate these particular weapons. It's very obvious. He hasn't been able to go after the guns that he really wants, so he's going after the martial artists. If you saw in 2020 the ridiculous aspect, most of these weapons from here confiscated, nothing but decoration movements and things like this. And the spears, even though they did not reach the designated length of there, they were double-edged. What I recommend then, that if you're in a state that's having any problem with the bladed weapons and things like this, rather than using a spear, this stick could just as easily have represented, simply put a red tassel on it from here. The same thing, you can buy the wooden swords. Well, they're not exactly what you're after. You're able to train with them, rather than run into the hassles. It's really too bad that this is carried over into what we call the classical weapons, where there's very little or no incidences of a spear being used in a robbery, used in a riot, any of the classic Chinese weapons. Their biggest complaint, of course, is against the throwing stars and the nunchucks. But why carry this over to weapons that have never been proven to be of any detriment to society? The second movement of this particular kata requires quite a bit of power, and I'm going to have to reverse my body direction so you can see what's happening on this. I will take it first of all in the introduction of this direction, and I will shift 90 degrees so you can see the movement. I reach out from here. What you may want to do also on this for your beginning students is to put a piece of tape at this point also at the end, so that they're very aware from here that they're not catching the end of it. Also, they'll have a reference of where to reach forward. Your movement from here then, on your first movement, is basically a spearing movement. Visualize the throat as your primary target. Your movement 1. Notice as I shift back now to this position, we're going to use a stance that isn't used very often. All the weight is going to go back onto the left foot. I'm going to arch the back into it from here. As I do, imagine now that I'm blocking up. With this particular movement, the opponent from here blocking up, then as hard as I can from here. Notice it came over the right shoulder. I was right back down to the left side. Let me take it from this particular position. I'm in 1, 2. Notice the position of the feet. They're approximately 18 inches apart. At this point from here, I'm going to completely lock the back leg from here. I'm going to lock the front leg from here as I drive my weight down. The center of balance will be directly between the shoulder and the heel. 1, 2 as you come back. This will be repeated 3 times as we take the kata. Your movement. 1, 2, 3. From this position now, the left foot draws up. The right hand is basically cupped over the left. You bring it up from this position from here and strike forward. Matter of fact, this used to be one of the exercises that we would use before we ever got into it from here, of the staff being held directly out from here. 2 hands also with the staff, the spear from here being held directly to the side, things like this. The easy way to start it, of course, as you're taking the exercises, is to take it in the middle of the staff. Progressively, as you get better on it, move further back until you're taking it from here, and you can hold it out with very little waver. As we're taking it now in a particular step, you came 1, the left foot steps up, you strike forward, step back. At this position now, we're simply going to change our direction 45 degrees. The strike will be directly to 130. It'll be a repeated movement. Your movement from here, 1, you step back, make the strike. As you shift, you notice there's a slight cocking of the hand, the spear in. Notice I'm using a bow on each of these movements, and back. The first sections now then have basically been a repeated series. The next section that's coming up is a little bit harder, a little bit more complex. The real power comes from the pivot of the body in conjunction with the hands. You're moving from here. Notice that when I'm doing this, the feet are going to basically stay in exactly the same position. It's simply going to be the shift from the horse and the bow that we've used in kata after kata. You're moving from here 1 to gain the power. Notice I go to a left bow as I'm blocking now from here and cocking from here. Right hand. Basically, Where's the center staff? Left hand. Notice the 180-degree pivot of the body now as I strike across the body to the opponent's head. Note, once again repeating the second section, the movement was in and back. The pivot of the bow, the cock of the hands. Notice the position of the staff behind the pivot and strike 180 degrees. The next movement was difficult enough that in Jim's version of the kata, I put this on slow motion so we could freeze frame it. You can see what we're doing. I will give you the explanation once again. Your movement from here. Imagine that the opponent's striking, so from here, you're picking the foot up to make sure that no strike is made. At the same time, I'm now blocking from here with the right hand, primary, the left hand for control. So the movement, the block, in. The next section of the kata, without exception, is forgotten by more students than any other section. What I recommend is that these two sections always be ran together so that the person, the student, does not lose the movement. I will put them together, then I'll break them down. This entire section should be taught as a continuous movement. One, hook, in, back, over, and around. The reason that this should be taught as one section is that the section that follows it is so similar that it's very easy to drift from one section to the other. Repeated on this section. The hook step, in. From this point, I draw back. I clear. Notice that the main power now is coming with the forward right hand low. Almost touch the point of the staff to the ground. The hook step in and back. The clearing movement. Notice at this point I come to a square horse, but I don't stop it. I clear over the head. The left hand goes under, and I strike back. This particular case, all the way back at a 45-degree angle to 430. You whip it out, pivot 180 degrees, and strike back directly back to the same position. Once again now, let me take those three sections and put them together. Your movement in, down. The cock, pivot, strike. Hook step in, and a spear. Clearing back. Pivoting over the head. Turn completely from this position. 180-degree reversal as you come out. Here's where the confusion comes. The next movement is straight in and then down from here. What we're going to do now is have a 45-degree reversal of direction as I come back to 12 o'clock. As I do, the right hand in a large circling movement comes past the right shoulder and strikes back down in a big circular movement directly to the left side of the body. Putting all of those sections together from here. One, the cock, strike, hook, in, back, over, around, straight in, down, the big circle movement, and strike. At this point now, what we're going to do is continue around a 360-degree circle. At this point, since you've had most of the elementary movements, most of the movements are simply going to be repeated. I will take it from this movement and a circle. Notice the cock of the hand that we used before, simply the pivot and strike. This particular case, back to 730. To here, it's the same hook step we used before and block. 1, 2, down. Now, this is where I get into a lot of confusion with people. What we're going to do from here is make that same circling movement from here, but notice I barely move the left foot. Let me explain the difference, the relationship here. What I have to do now is to change, get 45 degrees. Notice in this particular case, the right foot has to move through an entire 45-degree arc to get me around. Well, from this position, from here, Since I'm not going, notice on this one, I'm going to the back side of the body. Since I'm going to the back side of the body, the foot had to shift 45 degrees. From this position, it does it 1, 2. Since I'm going to the open side of the body, I barely shift the left foot, only about 2 inches. Circle, strike, down. Notice the difference on this one. After this strike down, we strike in and down again. Let me point out the difference. Notice that on our forward side, the strike was down. But at this point, we did not use any other movement. We simply cocked and made the strike, and I will continue the kata from here. The hook step in, down, the shift of the foot. In, down. Notice the repeated circular movement that we did before. Over with the right, strike back from here. Notice it is also, in this particular case, at a 45-degree angle. I step in and down. The next movement now breaks the sequence because we haven't had it before in this particular case. From here, this is a real power movement. You're blocking up in this particular movement. What I try to use as a training edge, visualize that you have a pitchfork. You have a load of hay from here, and you're throwing it back over the shoulder. In and down, so from this position, notice I go to a hard bow from here, but I'm going to go to a high bow because I'm going to come down on it. I want to lock against this from here. As I push down with the left and bring this right hand up as high as possible, visualize you're blocking under an opponent's weapon, and then we're striking back down. A repeated section now. We did our hook step in from here and down. In, down. Over, back. In, down. Strike back as hard as you can. Focus down as hard as you can. The next phase now is going to introduce the circling movements that used in both the spear and the staff. There's 2 different sizes of circles, the small circle and the large circle. And which circle you use is going to depend upon which angle you interrupt the opponent's weapon at. When I take this with an opponent on the breakdown, you'll get a better breakdown and description of why we use each of the circles. Your movement from here was in and down. You hook back hard, strike. The circles are clockwise. It's a small circle. When I mean small circle, we're using about an 18-inch radius from here, and a large circle. And as we do the large circle, I'm going to use the hook step again from here, carrying the foot and using the power movement up. So your movement was back, down hard. Small circle, large circle, in and down. We're going to continue around the circle, but what we're going to do now is to break the sequence. You notice up to this point, every time we've done an in and down, they've always been in sets of the 2 movements. The next movement now is going to be different. In the back, when I come over, it'll be in, down, and then it's going to have 1 extra spear as we step forward. Once again, taken from the hard movement, back, down. Small circle, large circle, hook step, in, down. The right foot shifts. In, down, in. The next phase now is going to be the spinning movement. And you'll see that this spinning movement is exactly the same one that we had in darkroom staff from here. My step out of it will be slightly different, but the movement will be exact. We came around now. In, down, in. As I step back, both hands come together just like they did in darkroom staff. Left side, right side, left side, right side. At this point, it comes over the head. The same transition of the hand. The left hand grabs, right hand turns over. I strike over the head. Bow out as far as you can and almost strike the ground on this one. Let me take this at a straight angle so you can see that particular transition. In, down, in. The same transition of the hands we had before. Left, right side of the body, left side of the body. right side of the body. The transition would come in continuous movement. I'm going to stop it for you. Left hand slides down. Right hand turns over. Step out directly from here. Hooks under the arm, bow, and strike. From here, the movement, I'm going to unwind it, pivot 180 degrees, and strike back to the front. Repeated now from the kata angle. In, down, in, back, the exchange of the hands. Left, right, left, right. The exchange of the hands, the pivot, and the strike. The next movement now is the same type of movement that we use in darkroom staff. From here, where we're going to step forward and strike. Take this again on our final movements. Left, right, left, right, strike, and strike. Once again, the hands adjust up. As I step forward with the right foot, there's a half turn, half turn. Notice this position. This is where it has to be because I have to clear it past this side of the body. As I do from here, once again, I change the hands. The left hand comes down, and the same turning movement, the right hand turns over. So your movement from here as we're coming. The spin, the spin. I step forward. Notice in the darkroom staff, we use the striking movement. The only difference on this one is I step forward, I'm going to use a spearing movement. So your movement from here. Now this is a strike almost, but the final movement is a spear. Half turn, half turn. Notice how far I cock this up from here. I spear out, I snap down, and we come back to the exact position that we started. Once again, when I take this with an opponent on a breakdown, you'll be able to see the application of each of the movements. Of course, the advantage of this without the opponent, there's no one in the way, so you can see the unobstructed movement from here as basically we worked through a 360-degree movement. Once again, the emphasis is on the power movements as you're coming from here. The spear, the strike down, are hooking movements back from here. The hooking steps, the striking over the head, the striking back, the use of the small circle and the large circle. Once again, Skylight Staff, name comes from the fact, the high movements and striking down.